So this is a scene change. I'm in Mazatlan, so I thought this would be an apt place to shoot the third installment of the crypto scavenger hunt. I've kind of feel that I have accomplished what I did want to with the hot tent, so probably going to be done with that for this presentation system, a group of presentations. It's a little windy here, unfortunately, so hopefully that's not too much of a bother, but in this particular one, we're going to be looking at a theory that I've developed called fractal dynamics and flesh that out to a degree and integrate it with spiral dynamics. But before we get going, I'd like to kind of give you an overview of how the first two were solved, because I feel that the individual that solved the first two now has a very much an unfair advantage in solving the rest of them. And I do kind of feel sorry for the guy that solved them, but there is a sense in which it would just be a runaway train. So here is the how the first one was solved, and it's to do with the key store. So I presented in the video numbers and letters, and if you put them in order, in essence, if you just took the numbers and letters and put them into my Ether wallet under the key store function, you would open up a wallet which had one PPT in it. You'd have to scroll down and find PPT to get that. The second one, I used a color coding system, so I cross-correlated the colors with the numbers. So if you just translated the colors to the numbers and then put that into the key store with all the other letters, then again you'd open up a wallet and it'd have 2 PPT in it. And so those two have been solved, somebody's got those. So now we're gonna do one for 4 PPT based on the theory of fractal dynamics. So again, that's a theory that I've worked on, and it doesn't have the kind of empirical backing that spiral dynamics has, so it's far more speculative in that sense. But I think that if you see the kind of patterns that connect, then it might open up the door to kind of presenting this as a potential real theory that's useful in the future. And we're looking at this from a far broader scale than spiral dynamics. So, you know, in spiral dynamics, there is this fractal kind of 6-on-6 pattern, but you know, a fractal's, just so you know, a self-similar pattern from near and from far. So I don't have a good example here, but you know, and sometimes on the beach you'll see kind of little wave dunes on the ground, and you know, that's a very small pattern compared to like the dunes in a desert, for example. So if you consider like the little waves of flowing sand on the beach as kind of spiral dynamics, a fairly zoomed in, localized perspective on a pattern, then fractal dynamics, if there's anything to it, is far more like the desert, which is far more sprawling and open. So in that sense, it extends to the beginning of the universe. And although I might not necessarily agree with all of how the cosmological people envision how the universe began and so forth, I am not, you know, experienced in that domain, so I'm going to go by what they say is the case and just kind of present that as a general rough outline as to how this kind of works. So whatever, 13.8 billion years ago, we have matter and this kind of chaotic soup emerge out of sort of nothingness potentially. And you know, that's a very violent and hostile environment for something to emerge in. In that sense, it's kind of surviving nothingness. It's kind of becoming that which is out of that which wasn't, potentially, if the cosmological theories are right. And I'm going to suggest that there's kind of a fractal correlation here with beige on a much zoomed in, like the beige is within the context of the self-reflective individual, right? So the individual that is, in that sense, a tool maker exposing itself to the you know, survivalistic qualities that they emerged from within. But in this sense, we're looking at indeed the very beginnings of this kind of violent, hostile environment that has this kind of similar quality that early humans 200,000 years ago or whatever probably kind of came into their own. And then we got, like, you know, vital life coming out of that at whatever 3.8 billion years ago, potentially, at least on our planet, maybe I don't know, maybe that's a little bit later than that, but somewhere in this universe, probably earlier than that, but still a great deal of time later, vital life, this kind of quality of almost magic emerges out of this kind of dead, lifeless, seemingly lifeless, and I'm going to suggest that it's not entirely lifeless, but this kind of almost dead quality of matter. As I've noted sort of in the previous video, there is this kind of sense of transcend and include. So matter has an interior quality to it. It has this kind of sense in which it has an interior landscape to a degree, but it's very primitive compared to even like phytoplankton or whatnot that emerged in the early life of this planet. And so the next major emergence, so if that was kind of parallel, if the second system is kind of parallel to purple, then the third system is kind of parallel to red. So there's a spectrum here from like sponges to fish to later on we have like reptiles proper and that reptilian brainstem. So with that, it really allows that being in its fullest expression to kind of dominate over the world. You can think about a dinosaur and how dominating a kind of being it was. For itself, it would kind of conquer in a certain sense, not in the self-reflexive way that red does. Red has that tool-making capacity that humans have, but in a far more simplistic kind of first-person perspective, it was dominating its reality. And then as time marches on and things complexify, we start to see mammals. And with mammals, there's this kind of limbic system. And the limbic system, that's the exterior correlate of the interior, which is far more empathic or caring in a certain sense or loving in a certain sense, not in the, again, self-reflexive way that humans do in a far more complicated fashion, but at least to the degree to which it has a sociocentric bonding with other of its kind in a certain sense. So you can see like how dogs, group up in packs, and they won't usually hunt each other or hurt each other like maybe a dinosaur would, but they do, seem to have a certain level of care for the in-group, and it can be vicious to the out-group oftentimes, in a sort of similar way that blue does. So that love quality is emergent within the mammal domain, but again, not in the self-reflexive way that humans do it. And so if that was the second person, then when we move into humans, we have this kind of third-person perspective. And this is the whole domain of spiral dynamics in a certain sense, and that is the fifth system in this context. So what humans do is we make these maps and we create tools that build upon tools in this self-building process through self-reflection. We're not really necessarily aware of how it's exponentially increasing, which comes later, but we are doing that. We're making that happen in this human domain in a self-reflexive, self-aware kind of way. And those are all the different stages in a bigger fractal, which is the fifth fractal as expressed in the kind of bigger context that I'm doing here, that spiral dynamics does. And then the sixth megafractal that I'm kind of suggesting here is what's emergent now. So in spiral dynamics, there's that green system, right? The green system has that quality of recognizing that we are embedded in a plurality of views, and that you can't perfectly see from my eyes because you're unique and I'm unique. Integral starts to twist that into the sense that there's a holarchy of these perspectives, but I'm suggesting that that is the primary focus in a certain way of the next super system. It kind of has a fractal relationship with green in a certain sense. And in that way, we take the tools of the whole fifth megafractal and we sort of stick it on our head through potentially cybernetics and stuff, and all the dangers and perils that might come with that. In the sense that it can both provide us with the promise of almost everlasting peace potentially if we do it right, but on the other hand, chaos, especially in the early goings of it, if we don't navigate it with care and love, and don't, you know, present ourselves to deal with the power orientations that these kind of superhuman capacities might allow us. You know, you can imagine when you have an interconnected, telepathic, super intelligent kind of human or superhuman, you know, there's going to be wills to power in ways that we hadn't kind of grappled with, and that would be the choral system in some sense. So these are the 6 major systems, and I'm going to present to you that the primary takeaway of this is a re-envisioning of brains, or how brains are. So in a very important sense, like neuropsychology talks about the triune brain, and it's not a perfect and not fully agreed upon idea, but it's, again, that we have this kind of reptilian brainstem, limbic system, and complex neocortex. So I'm adding 2 prior to that, and that's saying that there's kind of 2 brains before that. We have the matter brain, and we have the vital brain, the cellular brain in that sense. We have the matter and the cellular, and they all transcend and include each other. So you need the matter brain, you need the cellular brain to make up the reptilian, the limbic, and the reptilian brains, the complex neocortex. So we have, in that sense, 5 brains now, and we're kind of building our 6th, as Kurzweil would say. You know, the smartphone is an extension of our body, and in that sense, it's, you know, reaching out through Google and stuff, and I'd say DuckDuckGo is a better option, but to the kind of extended human brain that we've built up through history. So that whole 5th system is now being put, in that sense, on our head, and we're connecting up to it to build our 6th mega brain, which allows us potentially to see these kinds of fractal patterns. That is to say that if I hadn't had the access to all this information through that 6th sort of beginning brain, I wouldn't be able to come up with this map. So it's a very emergent quality of taking into account all these different super systems to be able to make a map for it. So we're going to carry on here with building this out in the next few videos and exploring this crypto scavenger hunt. Be well.
Absolutely.
Do you have downloaded playlists?
I have some, yeah.
Alright, well you can
It's not so bad, yeah. Totally. Because it's like...
So, Tyler, what do you think technology is going to be like in 10 years?
Blockchain based.
The exponential trends, I think.
Embarcadero Isla de la Piedra is going to make us survive.
There be riptides out there. Get you into survival mode.
It was mostly the water I was concerned about. So hopefully today.
When you're in a bit of a dangerous part of town, you gotta keep your head on the swivel. next super system. It kind of has a fractal relationship with green. So I have somewhat of a upgrade, I believe, to how the process was going to go for this PPT scavenger hunt. I think you'll be excited about it if you've been following this. So the traditional plan was to give away 16 PPT and then 32 PPT for the final two sort of winners of the crypto scavenger hunt. Although there's some tentative aspects to this, I haven't finalized anything at this point. I'm still in the process of, building out and fully actualizing the plan. But the tentative plan at this point is to purchase some land in Panama for the next couple months down the road. The particular location that I'm looking at is in, I believe it's called Boca del Toro in Panama, and that's kind of on the west coast, sort of near the north side of Panama, but it's, as far as safety goes, many consider it one of the safest places in all of Central America. It is also located right on the beach side of Panama, so we have, in other words, right on the ocean front. It is very tropical, but very isolated. This particular piece of land is approximately 4.5 hectares, and it's off the grid. You have to get there by a boat. So in other words, it is remote, and the trip there is about 40 minutes by boat. But all that said, the idea that I've been fleshing out is something of building a permaculturalist, sort of sustainable, that is to say sustainable tech, like, solar and, water catchment systems, and again, permaculture being the primary food source. A lot of that is already inbuilt. There's not that much needed to be done. It's kind of lots of cocoa plants, some banana plants and these sorts of things already present. But, in spaces I would flesh that out and add more food stuff. So the general idea is to use many of the resources already there. That's kind of the traditional permacultural mode, not devastating the land and so forth. Maybe even doing some sort of little coffee plantation. That's an open question if it's even a possibility, given the kind of climate. Oftentimes, coffee is done in higher regions, but that might be a possibility. And, the idea, I guess, is to create sort of a little cryptoverse there. And I'm going to offer the winners of the final two presentations here a section of land in that space. You can do what you want with it. It'll be yours. That is to say that, however, if you want to create a land division, you'll have to do that yourself. It'll be, I'm not going to pay for the land division, but you can do it. It'll be yours to do that with. And approximately 0.25 acres. Again, this isn't finalized, so hopefully by the time I have the fourth video ready, or the fifth or sixth video ready, I will be able to offer that. However, in second world countries, land titles pass very slowly, just the nature of it. And so this process could go on for a little while prior to actually being able to finalize anything, just so you know. So it'd be kind of an informal thing, the point of this completion of the fifth video here. But that's the general plan. Again, to flesh that out a bit, I might try to make it like a little eco resort kind of thing to some degree for the section of land that I have, and the kind of permacultural attitudes, the gesture towards that I've kind of felt inclined to do personally. Kind of comes from that turquoise world space of kind of, not being a burden on the land, but rather kind of enhancing it, or living at least kind of in some sort of balance with it. So I hope that's exciting for those that have been following this and have some apt to like kind of building that sort of ecosystem and sharing space in that sort of way, I guess. Again, I will flesh out the details further as time marches on. Any questions, you can leave comments below, and I'll try to get back to you on that front. So yeah, again, it would be probably about 0.25 acres if that particular piece of land is the one that I settle on as being the right piece. But again, it is pretty remote, and that process through the boat might be a challenging one, so I might actually have to go down there and see whether or not it is the right piece of land. And that might be actually the 5th video. I might use that as the expression for how I do the 5th installment of this crypto scavenger hunt. Okay, all the best.